Well, you're the second person to say that to me today.
Who's the first?
Whenever Sherlock Holmes comes up these days, BBC's TV series of a modernized version of Sherlock comes to mind. And what gets people excited the most is of course the performance of Benedict Cumberbatch. But after watching all 4 seasons of Sherlock, I have to admit that there is something quite strange about this series, which is that a lot of plot developments are so forgettable. For example, do you remember how Sherlock deduced the truth behind the Hound in The Hounds of Baskerville? And why did Sherlock have to kill the Mogul at the end of season 3? These are far from irrelevant side stories, but I bet a lot of people have forgotten what's led up to those events. All of these are actually related to how the creators chose to reimagine the story of Sherlock in the first place. So today, let's take a look at how BBC redefined the genre of one of its most popular shows. The first thing that caught my attention was how well the characterization was done throughout the series, and it's almost as if that every change made in this adaptation was intended to one-up Sherlock's characterization, which is also why this version of Sherlock is that much more impressive than the previous ones. And this brings us to cinematography, and how its creative use supported the characterization of Sherlock. Depicting Sherlock's superhuman quality of deduction would mark a huge part of his characterization. So now let's take a look at the following scenes and see how this quality is being portrayed differently in one of the movies and one of the episodes.
You're a governess.
Well done.
Your student. It's a boy of age.
Charlie's 7, actually.
Well, he's finished tall for his age. He flicked ink at you today. There are 2 drops on your ear, in fact. Which is why the lady for whom you worked lent you that necklace. Oriental pearls, diamonds, a flawless ruby, hardly the gems of a governess. We're engaged. The ring has gone, but the lighter skin where it once sat suggests that you spent some time abroad wearing it proudly. That is, until you were informed of its true and rather modest worth, at which point you broke off the engagement and returned to England for better prospects. Doctor, perhaps.
He's treating her to a meal, but his own portion is small. That means he wants to impress her, but he's trying to economize on his own food. Small plate, starter. He's practically licked it clean. He's hungry, all right, not well off. You can tell that by the state of his cuffs and shoes. He was a fisherman. Scarring pattern on his hands, very distinctive. Fish hooks. They're all quite old now. It suggests he's been unemployed for some time. So he turned to his widowed mother for help. Widowed? Yes, obviously. She's got a man's wedding ring on a chain around her neck. Clearly her late husband's too big for her finger. She's well dressed, but her jewelry's cheap. She could afford better, but she's kept it sentimental. Now, the
You get it. Though both of these scenes tell you how good Sherlock is at deduction, the delivery was very different. In the movie with Robert Downey as Sherlock, the use of close-up shots were very rare. In this 1-minute scene, Robert Downey made around 6 observations, but the close-up was only used once on Mary's hands. And even when Sherlock was mentioning Mary's ear or her necklace, the director didn't zoom in on these 2 areas to give us a closer look. And most of the time, a medium shot was maintained to capture the whole conversation. But in the TV series with a scene of a similar length, more than 10 close-up shots were used, and even if you've watched just a little bit of Sherlock, you'd be no stranger to this form of cinematography. You're gonna see something like this at least once in every episode, and has become a signature of Sherlock. So what exactly does this have to do with the characterization of Sherlock? In a way, all of these close-up shots serve as a change of perspective, and shifts our perspective from bystanders to Sherlock's, so that we can experience what he's observing firsthand, and are able to feel how extraordinary his observation skills are. On the other hand, in a lot of adaptations of Sherlock, we're watching as a third person as the detective deduces. As a result, Sherlock's prowess is not felt so strongly. Another point about the close-ups that I'd like to bring your attention to is that even in the movie scene, the close-up shot used was a very conventional shot. The camera was stable, focused at only one area. It has the usual function, to capture a piece of information and to deliver it to the audience. But the close-up shots in the TV series were dynamic. It may feature sideways scanning motion or rapid zooming into an area of interest. These motions are similar to how our eyes work when we're observing, which in turn accentuates the sense of a first-person observer. Also, huge props to Cumberbatch's acting in this scene. He may have exaggerated a little bit here, but generally he speaks a lot faster than all the other versions of Sherlock. Even though the stereotype that somebody talks faster, thinks faster, and is smarter may not be 100% accurate, but...
Really? Are you familiar with the Drake equation?
The one that estimates the odds of making contact with extraterrestrials by calculating the product of times Fi times Fc times L?
Yeah, that one.
It's still a very effective characterization, but in order to create a memorable character, fancy cinematography and great acting is certainly not enough. The plot is pivotal for us to see how characters deal with different problems. And here we go back to the opening remark, which is also why a lot of original Sherlock Holmes fans criticized this adaptation. In order to put up a great characterization, sometimes the creator had to do it in the expense of logic and consistency of the plot. Look at the story of the Hounds of Baskerville again. In the original Arthur Conan Doyle story, the murderer was second in line in succession to the Baskerville Hall. He attempted to murder the first heirs of the Hall by releasing a hound to create the illusion of an unfortunate accident, and so that he could inherit the fortune. And the key to solving the case is that Sherlock Holmes noticed the resemblance between one of the portraits in the hall and one of the suspects, and deduced that he was the attempted murderer and his motive. The case was not immediately obvious, it was full of suspense, but the revelation of the truth made sense and the audience could follow it. But when they remake the story into the episode, the key to cracking the case was this scene.
Get out.
What?
Get out. I need to go to my mind palace.
The what?
Watching Sherlock uses his mind palace here would definitely make him seem more OP, but at the same time viewers would feel that this progress is a little bit too abrupt, and the logical flow of the unraveling of the scene all goes out the window by this scene. A good detective story should hit the sweet spot that the clues presented would not make the mystery obvious, but the detective work would not be that much of a stretch. In the TV episode, the creators were too focused on showing us the genius of Sherlock, rendering the story itself unmemorable. The creators also altered the story to show us the emotional side of Sherlock, giving the character more depth. And this side of Sherlock is of course his love for Watson and Mary. The episode The Last Vow in Season 3 features the story of the king of blackmailers. In the original story, this blackmailer has a vault full of compromising materials called the Apple Door, but in the TV series, the Apple Door vaults are no longer physical.
Okay, so where are the vaults then?
There are no vaults beneath this building. The Apple Door vaults are my mind palace.
So how is he even gonna blackmail somebody when he doesn't have physical proof?
But if you just know it, then you don't have proof.
Proof? What would I need proof for? I'm in news, you moron. I don't have to prove it, I just have to print it.
In this era of pics or it didn't happen, would you think that this explanation is a little bit of a stretch? Of course you can argue that somebody's reputation can take a toll when the paper just prints it without even providing actual proof, or even BBC heroes firing shots at media tycoons like Rupert Murdoch. But it's undeniable that this explanation is more far-fetched after the twist, so the real question is why did the creators have to risk this and make such a tweak? And I believe the main reason is to set up this final scene. To show how deeply one character cares for the other, the best way is to show how much they're willing to sacrifice for the other. Sherlock Holmes wants to protect Mary, and if the compromising documents on Mary are physical, all he had to do was to destroy them, physically. But if all the materials are in somebody's head instead, Sherlock would have to face a charge of murder if he were to rescue Mary. And if he's really willing to risk that...
I'm not a hero! I'm a high-functioning sociopath! Merry Christmas!
This proves that how far Sherlock would go for Watson and Mary, and turns out to be a perfect characterization of Sherlock's sentimental side. So after all these analysis, what exactly can we conclude about this adaptation of Sherlock? When all of the changes made points toward the character development of Sherlock, and sometimes even the plot has to get out of his way. Plus, when our protagonist is equipped with a superhuman ability, it's actually not hard to realize that it is precisely a formula for superheroes. For a typical superhero movie to succeed, a good characterization is the most important aspect, because almost everything in the movie circles the superhero. So the creators have to do everything they can to showcase a superhero quality.
Perception has to be a unique opportunity.
That's more like it.
And the inner character of the superhero.
Go and pick a fight with a bad guy. Put yourself in harm's way.
Maintain eye contact.
Did I leave the stove on?
Basically, he trashed himself on drugs so that you'd help him, so that you'd have something to do, something doctory. You get that now, though.
Which is also why after watching stories of superheroes, what stays in our minds is the overall impression of the superheroes, rather than the details of the plot. And I believe what a lot of fans of the original Sherlock Holmes story didn't expect is how Sherlock Holmes is getting such a superhero treatment in this remake, and the whole series focused less on plot. So in a nutshell, Sherlock Holmes is a superhero in this series. Though the storylines were not exactly impressive, Benedict Cumberbatch definitely was. So whether you'd like to see how Sherlock uses his mind palace to decide how to fall in 3 seconds into being shot, or you'd like to see something more traditional and mystery oriented, this decision is yours to make.